Courtney Dorrington from Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada.
And I'm Amber Kate. You're watching Let's Talk Racism. This is one of a series of shows produced by university students from around the world.
I'm Newslam from Hong Kong Baptist University in Hong Kong.
And I'm Sharon Cher. We're going to try to shed light on the issues of systemic racism. This episode will be focusing on the education system and its cooperation of Black history into the curriculum.
We'll find out about how hard it is for ethnic minorities to get a good education in Hong Kong.
And we'll talk about diversity, or the lack of it in the media and film industry. Let's start out by finding out more about what each of us learned in school. There's a rich history of contributions of Black Canadians from politics to sports to the arts, but it's rarely taught in the school system. Personally, I learned about all these great contributions from visiting museums, but I realized that everyone might not have been as fortunate.
And talk about my school times. Actually, I seldom see the children of other races in my schools. Like, I rarely learn about their cultures or costumes of different races. Maybe I did learn a little bit of we should treat fair to the ethnic minorities in the liberal study, but we don't actually learn a lot in my school time in secondary school.
I would say that aside from a quick mention of Black Canadians participating in the Second World War, I don't really remember much else being talked about in the curriculum. And for that matter, it's not a mandatory component of the curriculum where I'm from. So teachers can decide if they want to include it or not. And for the most part, they decided against it.
Natasha Henry thinks that this should change. She's the president of the Ontario Black History Society. She's a teacher and curriculum consultant. Natasha advocates for incorporating Black history as a mandatory unit of study into elementary and secondary school curriculums.
Natasha told me that teaching more about Black history would help children understand more about their heritage and feel a sense of belonging and unity with their school community.
You know, that's important, and that could include decentering a Eurocentric curriculum, integrating, other stories, other experiences in meaningful ways, not in just add-ons or just as heritage months, but really thinking critically about the curriculum, thinking differently and addressing the disparate outcomes of students, particularly Black and Indigenous students, their academic outcomes and their educational experiences continue to remain concerning over decades. Anti-racist education is equally and even more so important for non-Black students. In order to disrupt the development of prejudice, and then contributing to and perpetuating discrimination. And so it's important for white students, South Asian students, students of different backgrounds, in order to be exposed to this pedagogical frame. Important to pay attention to and recognize what is the makeup of Canada, and and respect all of these different stories and these contributions of different groups of people who have made Canada what it is today.
You can watch my full interview with Natasha and all of our Let's Talk Racism interviews on our website. A lot of people in Toronto agreed with Natasha. About a decade ago, they got together and created the Afrocentric School in the city. It's a place where children can get an education that incorporates Black history and culture.
The Afrocentric School is full of posters celebrating Black accomplishments throughout history. The library has books featuring stories from ancient history to the civil rights movement. One article I read quotes students as saying that it's a place that helps them love and accept themselves. A lot of the teachers are also of visible minorities as well.
Sharon, are there any schools in Hong Kong like that focus on history and other cultures?
I think we have school like this in Hong Kong, and we do learn about Hong Kong history and the history of other Asian countries, but we don't learn much about the ethnic minorities. And there are not many schools that are teaching ethnic minorities just for them. How about you, Eunice?
Yeah, I seldom learn about the cultures and the customs of the other races. But I think it also should be included in the noble classes in Hong Kong, because teaching people around various history and of other minorities and letting them know about other cultures is also their civil responsibility.
We've been talking about the need to teach children about Black and ethnic history, But in some countries, the need to learn a certain language is important and almost even integral in order to get a good education.
Definitely. That's true in Hong Kong, where it's important to be fluent in Cantonese.
Getting a good grade in Chinese language in Hong Kong's diploma of secondary education exam often determines whether a children can make it into the college. But for some ethnic minority school leavers, this is challenging.
They can opt out to take alternative tests, but that may subsequently impact on their college career and job options. Eunice and I did this story.
About 3% of primary and secondary school students in Hong Kong do not speak Chinese. According to the Education Bureau figures, many of them, like Balay Afsar, have been in local schools for years. He's ethnic Pakistani and came here in 2010. Yet, when it comes to taking a high school leavers exam, Balay is considered not good enough to take the regular Chinese language diploma of secondary education. Instead, he had to take the GCSE, a Chinese exam meant for students in the UK.
GCSE is not helping you at all. It's just the EDB is pretending, giving us opportunity. So it was easy for me to, even I started learning in Form 3, but then Form 4 when I set for the GCSE, I still got A star, I think. Yeah. So it was kind of easy. Maybe I learned faster, I think, I'm not sure.
Balay is now a final year student at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He thinks the lack of integration of non-Chinese speaking students really started in secondary school and continues through college.
Like maybe a year I was picking up Cantonese because I was trying to speak. Even my lecturer will speak Cantonese. Even my classmates will speak Cantonese. Even my coaches will speak Cantonese. So you can see I am in all Cantonese environment. So the biggest problem is we are separated from Chinese and non-Chinese. Chinese will learn in different classes, non-Chinese will learn in different classes.
Peter Cheng works at Hong Kong Unison, an NGO that helps ethnic minorities in Hong Kong.
將啲少數族裔同學仔喺主流班級裏面抽離出嚟，然後另外教佢哋中文。
Wong Kai-chi has been teaching Chinese to non-Chinese speaking students for 2 years.
即係我哋學中文都知道啦，我哋其實唔需要語法都可以學得到嘅。咁靠啲乜嘢咧？就係靠我哋講。咁但係如果日常生活少講咧，咁就會連帶到佢其他寫啊，即係你會發現佢寫啲次序唔啱啊，跟住聽啊，一樣會影響，咁就會有呢啲問題咯。
Non-Chinese speaking students often don't have the choice of taking the regular Chinese exam.
I think most of the Chinese school will force you to take it. Yeah. Even I didn't know what is the university requirement, and because school will not really like tell you the requirements of the school or what is explanation of GCSE. They just say it's a requirement.
其實佢哋嘅中文教材係相對地簡單in a sense of 咧係超級 BB 班，唔能夠足以使佢哋將來喺社會上立足嘅中文 level。
Beyond college, taking the easier Chinese exam can affect a young person's job prospects because employers may consider them less competent in languages. Sharon Cheung, the young reporter.
And what happens once minority students graduate and try to find jobs?
It's quite difficult for them. The employment rates of the ethnic minority college graduates in Hong Kong is quite high.
And that leaves limited choice for the job seekers from South Asia. My classmate Christy Lowe and Yvonne Chung reports.
So I have actually 2 master degree, and it was a bit difficult for me to find the job. I was doing some research work before, and in Hong Kong, I applied in many universities, HKBU, City University, Open University of Hong Kong, Education University. So many universities, maybe 5, 6 or more. Maybe it would be better to get some consultancy, you know? So I went to the place of Pastoral Center to David to get some consultancy. And he was trying to help me. He was trying to make some referral letter for me, reference letter. Then he was trying to reach out the organization that I'm applying for.
我哋見到其實有個現象就係僱主咧喺香港僱主咧，其實都好常有個現象就係、佢哋係唔係都話我需要中文，我需要中文嘅讀寫或者我需要中文嘅聽同埋講。咁但係有啲工作上面係咪真係需要中文咧？其實我哋存在疑惑嘅。即係如果我哋其實 service 咧每年個service target 咧就大概100人左右。咁within 我哋100人啦，咁我估大概都有8至10個至 at most 15個啦，係相對高學歷。
You heard one of the people in that story talk about having a master's degree from another country and still not be able to find work in Hong Kong. Does it also happen in Canada?
You know, this actually makes me think of occasions where I've gotten into a taxi or an Uber and I'm speaking with the driver and they're telling me that they're highly qualified, you know, engineers or researchers in their home country, but when they immigrate to Canada, their qualifications aren't recognized. And further, it's so expensive to requalify that they're forced to rather work lower skilled jobs.
I noticed that too, Courtney. I came across a statistic online and it said something like 1 in 5 taxi or Uber drivers have a master's or bachelor's degree. And I completely understand that it's jobs that we need to get people around, but at the end of the day, it's a waste of someone's potential and what they're able to do. And I've also noticed that it's not just with taxis and Uber drivers, it's also with a lot of less skilled, lower paying work jobs like cleaning or maintenance or working in seniors' homes or restaurants.
It's also the same case in Hong Kong because many of the ethnic minorities also work for the jobs that don't need for qualifications. Like many of them work for queuing up outside the ticket office to buy concert tickets. And some of them do also construction work as they all do the work that's dirty and unwanted by the locals. But some of them got good bachelor, but they are unqualified or they don't know how to speak Cantonese.
Can you expand on the concert tickets?
Yeah, it's hard for Hong Kong people to buy concert tickets because most of them are bought by the people who sell them in a higher price, and they just employ or recruit some ethnic minorities to buy for them.
Okay, so it's just things that they don't want to do, they ask ethnic minorities to do those things.
Yeah.
Discrimination or lack of opportunity in the workplace isn't limited to ethnic minorities who come from outside of our countries. Many people of color who were born in our countries find it hard to move up the corporate ladder.
Our next story is from our partner, BUAS University in the Netherlands. Yvonne Dubai is a Black employee within a large Dutch commercial company. She experiences racism in her job.
Yvonne says even when companies hire visible minorities, there's still racism behind the decision.
A very important part of the people saying, yes, we need quota is like, otherwise it's never going to happen. It sounds like it doesn't really have to do with the fact that you're being discriminated. It's just that they are not educated enough to see that every person is a unique individual. So that's why I believe it's about educating a lot more than about quota, because quota is just being enforced because they don't really know why they're doing it. They don't realize that by being diverse within their boardroom, it actually benefits everyone within their company. For me, that's the whole point when you talk about the road to getting in corporate organization being inclusive. It's how do you get there? And I think you tackled the exact point is it's all about education. And it starts already, and it doesn't start in your first job. It should start way before that.
You're watching Let's Talk Racism, a collection of 5 shows created by students from 7 countries.
You can find the rest of our shows on our social media, where we tackle more stories about the past and present issues related to systemic racism around the world.
As well, our website has a complete version of all of our interviews, so be sure to head over there to check it out.
Earlier in the show, we talked about how we don't learn much about the history or accomplishments of people of color in school in either Canada or Hong Kong.
What we see in the media, like films, advertising, television, it also reflects our own culture back to us. So let's talk a little bit about the news. First of all, the people who present the news. Sharon and Eunice, how many different people of ethnicities are news reporters or anchors in Hong Kong?
Well, that's not common to see a non-Chinese appear in the media. One exception is Nobela Quosa. She's a Pakistani. However, she's born in Hong Kong and she's a local, and she's the only non-Chinese, Chinese language news reporter.
Eunice, how do people respond to Nobela?
So actually, Hong Kong people are not concerned that she's Pakistani. They just respond to how good she does in the show. But she is the only one right now in any of our new cast. How about in Canada?
Well, growing up in Canada, I didn't really see a lot of diversity when it came to who was reporting the news. It was all pretty uniform. All the broadcasters would look the same. But now we have a variety of different people of color who are reporting the news, kind of like Marcy Ian and Dwight Drummond. There's also now Brandon Gomez, who's really popular as a Black reporter, and youth love him just because he uses a lot of millennial references in his reporting style. It really just adds some diversity to the news reporting.
You know, I find that it often feels somewhat contrived. We heard earlier from Yvonne, who feels like there's quotas for Black employees in the corporate world. I feel like sometimes it can be like that in the media as well. And it's hard to know what the genuine intentions are, whether it's to create a diverse representation and on the news and on the media, or if it's just to fulfill some quota.
Our next story looks at representation and equal opportunity for people who are in the creative side of the media industry: actors, writers, directors, and producers of film and television.
Muna Daria is a young woman of color navigating her way through the Canadian media industry. She is passionate about script writing and filmmaking, both of which she used to tell stories that amplify the voices of those she feels that should be heard. But even in the early stages of her career, she already experienced racism on the job.
When I started my master's program in film and television, that if I wanted to create the kind of stories that were like important to me or that felt relevant, I definitely had to start thinking about writing them. That's what kind of took me on the journey of like writing and creating projects that I want to see out in the world and that represent the kind of people that, you know, sometimes get left out or who I think should be heard from. I always am so like optimistic and positive about things, but I have been reflecting on like my career so far, and like I have certainly had some challenging interactions. I had a really challenging time on a film set where I was like harassed. I was bullied. I was like yelled at. This individual like threw things in my direction, and I was so shocked. Like I was so shocked at the fact that interaction happened. I did what I could within my like capabilities in that space to be like, you are making me uncomfortable. This is unacceptable. And in the end, I had to kind of remove myself from this learning experience. There were white people in the room at the time who had overheard my discomfort and who ignored it or who did not step in. I found that in the end, there was no recourse. Like I didn't know where to go. I was not comfortable initially speaking about it, but I didn't know how to address it. Despite like my ability to get along with people and to be comfortable in different spaces, I have had like interactions like this in the film industry over and over again. I think there needs to just be some training, like so that people are aware of their bias and they're aware of like how they are engaging with people that they may have not had to work with before. Just like as we have like health and safety certificates, we need to have like mandatory diversity training and like cultural sensitivity certificates. I think it would be useful to have a hotline, some place to call, like if people have had an experience and it feels traumatic. It would definitely allow the industry to look at what's going on and look at it in a way that's anonymous. it's too bad that it's taken this long for us to, and it took a racial pandemic, and it took the challenges that African American and African Canadians and Black people across the world have felt in order for us to start having a conversation about like discrimination across platforms, whether it's like in the film industry or like anywhere else.
I did some acting as a child, and I've been on a lot of sets. I've heard directors say things like be more Black or act more Black, as if they're encouraging a sort of performance that's a stereotype. And it seems like to make it as an actor, you have to really play into that.
Well, Christine Brown knows firsthand what it's like to be successful in the film industry in Canada. She's the first Black woman to write, produce, and direct a feature film in this country. A lot of her work, which ranges from films to documentaries to novels, tackles topics like poverty and social inequalities.
My classmate Carson Martoni talked to Christine about the importance of telling Black stories and why the people who fund film and TV projects often neglect those stories.
Their experience of people of color is very limited, so their understanding of people of color is very limited. And when people of color present them with stories that veer away from the narratives that they are comfortable with, they don't know what to do with it. So, and then they just said no. So yeah, so it's very problematic. You know, how do we get more stories, more diverse stories from diverse content creators on the screen when there's no real understanding of those stories or the population that's creating those stories? We're not allowed to see the full range of stories that come from these communities. And again, these are narratives that are that have been perpetuated for decades. And it's the narratives, again, that the people in power are most comfortable with. That's how they see us. They see us as slaves, former slaves, and they see us as, gangbangers and whatever. And so when they're presented with something that's different, they shy away from it. But yeah, those images are very damaging because we don't see the full spectrum of the stories, the beautiful stories that come from Black people and people of color. The change has to come from people like you, Carson, and other young content creators who storm into the industry and just make your projects no matter what, and just take over these establishments, take over the broadcaster, take over the CBC, take over all. That's what has to change. And I think it may take another generation to happen, but I think that's what has to happen.
I think Christine is right. Real change happens from the top down as well as the bottom up. We need qualified, diverse executives in our major media corporations if we want a more representative, truer media or diversity in the arts as a whole, whether that be in film or music or writing.
Yes, our next story looks at another form of artistic expression, dance. Kevin Cruden is a 27-year-old Black choreographer and dancer in the Netherlands.
His experience with racism led him to create a dance film called Stand Up that intertwines his emotional connection to the Black Lives Matter movement with his artistic expression. A partner at BUAS University produced the story.
My name is Kevin Cruden. I'm 27 years old. I'm from Almere and I'm a professional dancer and choreographer. I started when I was 11 years old, 27 now, time goes fast. And I wasn't able to move at all. I only had the rhythm because I'm Black, thank you God. I shot my first video at this location and then it kind of exploded. My friend was like, yeah, just post it. I was like, okay. And then I got my first gig in Czech Republic and kind of the rest was history. So to me, dance is like a big outlet to express my feelings, my emotions, everything. And I just wanted to express my life through my dance. And I've never done that before. But this time I was like, no, I want to use my art to make a change. At least if it's only one person that feels inspired or anything, I would be like really happy and fulfilled.
No justice! No peace! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
It's not only because of the movement, because I've experienced racism my whole life. So to me, it's not just a movement, you know, it's my life. So I was like, okay, this is the time. So I asked a lot of dancers and friends of mine, like, would you like to join? I have this idea, blah, 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 blah. They were like, yeah, we're all up for it. It was a really fast process. I heard the song called Stand Up. It was from the movie Harriet. She was also somebody that was really important in Black history, freed a lot of slaves. And when I heard the song, I just felt like my ancestors calling me, you know? And it just happened really fast. And when I put it online, it's just like, it exploded. Music producers contacted me, people from the theater. They wanted to make a whole theater show about it. And it just kind of exploded. I've done a lot of interviews and I feel really humble and blessed. And that's why I'm here today as well, because of the video. When you look at the commercial dance industry, when you look for Black dancers, it's not really a familiar thing. I think racism here is kind of undercover a part of the culture. Culture and everything has to change with time, I think. It starts at home, talking to your friends, talking to family members, and putting yourself in an awkward situation, because the talks will be painful sometimes and awkward, but I think only when you have those moments, the change will come. And I put all my faith and trust in the new generation, because I think the older generation, you cannot change someone that has an upbringing for like already 30 years with racism, like knowing it or even without knowing it, you cannot change a person. So I think the new generation, I put all my faith and trust into them.
Well, actually, I think that Kevin is very courageous, because I remember that he mentioned a concept in his campaign, like being treated fairly shouldn't be an issue. Like the Black and the ethical minorities should definitely be treated fairly in a common sense, but not an issue to be mentioned. I think he's very courageous to speak out and actually create a campaign for that. We know that's hard.
I'm an actress in the Toronto film industry, actually, and in recent years, I've seen a huge push for diversity in the casting room.
I completely agree, Courtney. Unless it's integral to the story that the actor is Caucasian, usually a casting director will see all types of races for one role, and that's a move in the right direction. You can also see it at the Shakespearean Festival and at other theater festivals as well. The scripts were originally written for white actors, but are now played by people of all races.
That's it for this episode of Let's Talk Racism. I think it's really important for all of us as new media professionals to be having these conversations, because it means that we're moving forward in the industry to ameliorate these issues. It is our responsibility to lead the way for the media that will be produced in the future. That way, we can start to see real grassroots change.
It's glad to know more about the racism problem around the world, and these issues are something that I never imagined. I think everything is working quite well and going to a right direction, but I would like to have some final reflection on my own place, like Hong Kong are quite problematic in every aspect, like education and examination, recruitment requirements, and I really hope that substantial change will be worked, but that actually requires the government and a better education to nurture people. How about you, Eunice?
Yeah, I agree with you, Sharon, that in Hong Kong, that the progress of accepting ethnic minorities is still a step behind, that many of the industries still are dominated by the local Chinese. But I think that it's also our responsibility of the new generation to move forward, to make differences to the society and bring that everyone in society can be treated and live normally and fairly.
I completely agree. Well, that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you so much for watching Let's Talk Racism. You can watch our other shows on Facebook, YouTube, and on our website. Goodbye.
Bye.